minutes.
One of them two goes in some South Sea Island somewhere.
I love it. Up in Launceston, obviously.
It's a bit pale. I think we should get a bit more sun now.
Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to start the meeting now, and I am dialing in and sharing this first part of the meeting via Canberra. I'm hoping that my connection is reasonable, otherwise I will have to log off and pass on to the Deputy Lord Mayor, but I'll persist for now, and hopefully that all works okay. We are obviously live streaming this to the community, and if you could just wait until the Chair acknowledges you before you speak for the recording. We have no apologies that I'm aware of, but I don't think Councillor Ewan is there at the moment. Is that correct?
That's correct, Lord Mayor.
Okay, so perhaps coming a little late. I'm going to start the meeting just in recognition of the deep history and culture of this place. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which the City of Hobart was built, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. The minutes of our meeting from the 7th of June, would someone like to move those?
Before you do that, Lord Mayor, I just saw a message pop up on the Zoom feed, a text message from Alderman Zuko saying that he's having a hard time hearing what's going on. Can we just perhaps get that resolved before we move on?
Thank you, through you.
Alderman Zuko, was it?
Yeah, I'm back now.
Okay. So minutes of our 7th June meeting, moved by Deputy Lord Mayor.
So moved, Lord Mayor.
I'll second, Lord Mayor.
By Alderman Barakis. All those in favour?
Aye.
In favour say aye. Aye. Say no. Carried unanimously. Item 2 is transfer of agenda items. Are there any items that need to be transferred? There being none, we'll move on now. Communication from the Chair. I will just report to the meeting that the National General Assembly of the Australian Local Government Association did just pass our motion on the 5G network unanimously. There is obviously a lot of concern amongst the local government sector about the rollout of 5G and its impact on streetscapes and council infrastructure, and that was all quite well unanimously accepted. So that's positive news that motion has been passed. I don't have any other communications from the Chair. Item 4 is notification of council workshops, and I note that we had a workshop on the 9th of June on Capital City Strategic Workshop, where there were 10 elected members present. Public question time. I understand we have a public question CEO, is that correct?
That's correct, Lord Mayor. We have one this evening.
So I'll invite Isla McGregor to stand and ask a question.
Thank you. My question is to you, the Lord Mayor. I'm conducting research on the methods used to discredit and attack dissidents and whistleblowers on contemporary human rights issues in Tasmania. I was recently alerted to a letter that you wrote, published on a Facebook page, in response to some information supplied to you by Scott Seymour. You confirmed agreement with his suggestion that the statement made on the plaque on the Crowther statue was factually incorrect. Can you please explain what measures you took to ensure that information presented to the public in the name of truth-telling was in fact true, and if so, what steps were taken, who were consulted, and what actions have been taken to publicly correct the record no other statements have been demonstrated to be false.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McGregor. Thank you, Ms. McGregor. Thank you for your question about the Truth-Telling Art project. I will take your question on notice and provide you with a written response in due course.
Lord Mayor.
Yes, Alderman Briscoe.
I understand that question was submitted last week, and in the normal course of events, a written response from you is forthcoming at this meeting. In the absence of it not being forthcoming, can your response also be put on the public record rather than just to the person who asked the question? In other words, gets published in the next minutes of this council?
I think that's totally fine as a request, but I was alerted to the question about half an hour ago, so I'm not sure about your understanding of the process. But I think it's reasonable for the question to be made available.
The answer to the question to be made available, Lord Mayor.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Item 6 is petitions. Have we got any petitions?
Sorry, Lord Mayor, sorry to interrupt, I was trying to stop you. Just a point of clarification. We put questions on notice on our minutes before. I just need that clarified, please, through you to the General Manager or whoever.
The CEO?
Yes, CEO, sorry.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm not actually sure of that. I'm sorry, Alderman. I'm happy to take that on advisement and come back to you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I don't think we have any petitions. I don't, so we'll move on to item 7, which is supplementary items. Are there any supplementary items for the open meeting?
No, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Moving on to item 8, which is indications of pecuniary or conflicts of interest. Would any elected members like to identify any items for this in the open agenda? Okay, there being none, we will now move on to item 9, which is the budget for 2021-22. We had a special meeting of all council committees last week where we considered this in some detail. And I will invite Alderman Zuko to move the motion of the
You're in front of that, okay. Lord Mayor, I'll move the motion as is on the books. We'll just very briefly speak about it.
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, this has gone through extensive consultation with the elected members and officers. We've had a number of workshops. We had a meeting of all committees. Actually, it was quite a fruitful meeting of all committees. It was actually quite good to have a very good debate on the rate. There is going to be a slight increase in the rate, which is not too much above the CPI. It's going to range between the 2.73. Some people might get up to 3.2, but it'll average around about the 2.77, which is, and I believe is a reasonable rate. We have cut expenses dramatically across the board, in particular our staffing expenses. We've looked at potential borrowings. The other thing, also, Lord Mayor, we're going to review the estimate in halfway through, which I think that will give us a better indication on how we're travelling. In all, I think the council staff have done a great job, and I commend the elected members who support this in committee.
Thank you, Alderman Zuko. Discussion? Any discussion from elected members? No comments? No? I might just say just a very few words if I can. Look, just to really follow up on Alderman Zuko's introduction, this budget does set us on a bit of a road to recovery following a very negative impact on our budget during COVID. So we had a significant deficit this year, but as a result of this budget and the hard work of the staff, we will return to a surplus this financial year. And that's really good news and a financially responsible position for the city to take. As Alderman Zuko has said, the budget will see an average rate increase of 2.73%, or about $70 per year. I do think it's also worth noting, just for the record, that we have continued to freeze the charges for waste collection, including our FOGO service, and the budget does include a $43 million capital works program. But it is focused mainly on maintaining and replacing existing assets rather than building new projects. So there is $18 million to maintain and refurbish roads and footpaths, and $13 million to ensure parks and sporting facilities and bushland areas are also maintained and old assets replaced. So it has been a difficult year, but I think this budget certainly does strike the right balance, and I certainly recommend it fully to the council. Okay, so if there's no further discussion, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. And now I'm going to give my apologies for the rest of the meeting and ask that the Deputy Lord Mayor takes the test. I wanted to be here for the budget, but I think it's a bit challenging to chair the entire meeting from Zoom. So, do we need a motion to get the Deputy to chair the meeting?
Lord Mayor. So through you, Lord Mayor, no motion required.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. My apologies for the rest of the meeting. Good night.
Thank you, and I note that Councillor Ewan has joined the meeting. Now, item 10, Council is acting as a planning authority. 10.1 is 201 Macquarie Street, and I'll call on Alderman Barakis to present the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Item 10.1 is 201 Macquarie Street. The motion is that the council refuse the application for demolition, alteration, partial change of use to office and 2 multiple dwellings, a new building for 45 multiple dwellings. The motion's recommended the motion that came from the committee was for refusal. I'll move that and reserve my right to speak, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Alderman Briscoe. Thank you. Discussion?
Yes, I will.
Oh, Alderman Thomas.
For Macquarie Street. I think this is I suspect there will be some more discussion. I think there should. This particular case is really quite difficult because if you, and I have some firm support subject to the work that's being presently done in terms of the precinct plan, that the work that was done by the architect, the extensive work that was done by the architect is of great value to the city. The shape, the topology, the way in which he's shown through that report, the way in which the city is layered into heights, I think is extremely valuable for our city going forward. What I don't think that particular, and with that as well, are issues this council continues to support, which is inner city infill, rather than having all our development way out in the suburbs with extensive services required, with transportation issues, with car and bus congestion, etc. I won't talk about ferries because I still don't believe we'll see that. The reality here is that if this development is not approved, then we lose a significant number of apartments, significant number of people able to walk into our city to enjoy its facilities and its recreation, all because, in my understanding, because of a transition from the height from the front of Macquarie Street, because it doesn't abut directly onto Macquarie Street. It's a fair way back. It's got a couple of a house layer to transact before it starts, but it's layering down to the rivulet. And in my impression, the work that was done by Lee Woolley was of the frontages of all those buildings principally, and the layering effect from the port right through to North Hobart. At this, if you were looking at the Lee Woolley report, you'd actually have no issue, I would suggest, at the front of this building. It's only if you take into account the secondary nature of the layering towards the back of the rivulet. Now, I think if somebody was to ask Lee Woolley, he would say that would probably be, in some cases, what I would have done as a second study, because when you actually consider his report properly, most of it is about the frontage of the building and the layering up or down, whichever way it starts. So I actually think that this is a case in between. It's a difficult case because the Lee Woolley report, which of course is not we're not required to follow because we haven't accepted it yet, despite its very good value. The Lee Woolley report would have 15 metres at this spot, and this one is 20 metres. But in my respect, I think there are a huge number of countermanding values to this development that I don't believe that a refusal is justified. And I certainly hope that as we go through, if there is a foreshadowed motion, that foreshadowed motion is debated through this council tonight.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Chair. Look, a question to begin with through you, Chair. What was the original council officer's recommendation on this one?
It's for approval.
For approval. Look, I think I'd like to foreshadow the original officer's recommendation. When we discussed this, and we did go in some depth at the committee, and look, I think Alderman Thomas has sort of hit it on the head. This block is of such a nature, but there really is a transition from the front at Macquarie Street to the back. And, you know, it is so steep, and we heard from the developers to why it was designed in such a case. But what we also heard was the efforts they'd gone to actually get that officer recommendation. They discussed how from their original plan they'd taken a whole story off. They'd taken from memory there was going to be a rooftop. I mean, I'm sure any developer would be jumping with joy if they could put a rooftop little amenity garden in place, because they'd no doubt be able to sell the units for a lot more money. But they actually worked with our officers to ultimately come to what was a mediated, if I can use that term, solution here, and to gain their approval. And look, you know, I can appreciate the fears of some. You know, obviously we've only got the one rivulet, and the building on the other side of the rivulet isn't original on Collins Street there. But, you know, we've got to keep in mind next door to this is, you know, a very large building across the road, the old Barb's. Again, a very similar building. And we did hear evidence that, you know, when you look at it from the street level on Collins Street, you know, it isn't really any higher than those two buildings. And again, you know, we saw in the committee and we heard from the applicant that they had designed it from the Macquarie Street side such that I think from memory it was only about 4 stories tall. So look, I thought the original officer's recommendation in this instance was correct, and I'd foreshadow the motion that we move to the original officer's recommendation. Thanks.
Briscoe?
Yeah, just very briefly, I did walk around the site with the architect, and certainly the architect went through all the issues, and I think even the committee had no problems with the Macquarie side, Macquarie end of the building. And I don't think any of the deputations that, against having concerns about this building mentioned the Macquarie Street side. It's essentially what the view is from what the effect of the building is on properties in Mole Street, and in my opinion, the dominating aspect of it, because it's built right on the boundary of the rivulet, on the other side of the small rivulet size, is the sandstone buildings of Old Walker Old Walker Granary, now a upmarket PR firm, and surrounding it there are a number of heritage buildings, including one that I'm particularly fond of is the little weatherboard cottage that's almost opposite this, that is one of the last, if not the only, weatherboard cottage dating from around 1808. So, and where Hobart initially, before it started turning into sandstone and brick, was basically weatherboard. So standing there at that point, looking over the sandstone of Collins Street there, then suddenly we will see this building quite tremendously high, with no stepping down to the rivulet. The old baths, there is a lot of stepping down. I think it's a couple of stories too high, but at least there are stepping down, and also aspects of those developments give a considerable deck space, and also giving light to apartments there, quite upmarket apartments. But the apartments that are going into this building are significantly mainly one-bedroom apartments with no frontages on, no decks on the Collins Street side. And to me, if we're setting a trend for that whole area, you could imagine, because there's no other building on Macquarie Street that goes to this depth to the rivulet. I think we've got to, I think the committee got it right by refusing this application, or recommending for refusal. Again, with many applications, as Alderman Baraka said earlier, sometimes developers or applicants need one or two goes to get it right, and I think the developer could come back to us with a step-down design, maybe lose a few apartments, and still achieve an economic outcome. This is a very important part of Hobart. I like to call it the Paris end of Hobart. And a building that size wouldn't be allowed in central Paris because it would be too high. And having, as I said, having it right beside the rivulet with low-storey sandstone buildings in front of it, and the other big building in Macquarie Street has got a really big setback. It's nowhere near the rivulet. And I think if you walk along this area, which I'm very familiar with, you'll see what I mean. This is going to be an important route, and it is already an important route from people come from South Hobart using the rivulet path. For cyclists, it will get, and runners and walkers, and people doing recreation. As soon as those traffic lights go in, and we have, I imagine that there'll be a lot more traffic along here. Tourists walking to the city, from the city along Rivulet Park, will not want to see this modern building that overhangs this heritage part of Hobart. So now, because we have people who are not present at the meeting, the foreshadowed motion might get up tonight, which, but I hope that the recommendation from the Planning Committee will get up.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yes, Chair, I wasn't going to speak tonight because I've got a massive sore throat. But
Alderman Zuko.
Yes, I have to say something. We have desperately been crying out for affordable housing. We desperately need more apartments that are affordable in the city. The mere fact that this is predominantly one-bedroom apartments, only a few two-bedroom apartments, demonstrates the target market that they're after. You know, for so long I've heard, oh, this is for the upper end, the upper echelon, and everything like that. Well, these apartments, as far as I'm concerned, are not for the upper end, the upper echelon. They're one-bedders. They're going to give opportunities for those people who are struggling to find somewhere to sleep. You know, I cannot believe that we are going yet again against officer recommendation. I'm sorry, I say this constantly in this chamber. You know, we have a planning department We have a group of people there that are experts in their field, but constantly we want to undermine and override their recommendations to this council. Now, if we want to have some more livable apartments in this city, we've got to look at developments such as this that actually deliver what we've been seeking. What also annoys me is that this here has gone through extensive consultation with our council officers, but yet we seem to either bow or make decisions based on who lobbies us. I don't make decisions based on that. And you know, I've said time and time again that maybe it's time that planning got taken away from council. This is a prime example of why I advocate that. You know, I don't know what our budget is for our director, but maybe our director and all his staff should not bother doing these reports, because we're just going to overturn them. It's ridiculous. Now, if we are serious about having some affordable apartments, this is a prime example of one. And not only that, part of the reason why our budget only went up at about 2.7% is the mere factor of the amount of development we've had in the city. This actually assists us, because the more development we have in the city, the more it will assist the rate base overall and hopefully reduce rates in the long term. I will be supporting a foreshadowed motion, and I really urge each and every elected member, if they're serious about doing something about affordable housing in this city, this is one you've got to support.
Thank you, Alderman Zuko. Any further discussion? Councillor Dutta, and then Alderman Barakas.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question, and I need information or clarification on this matter. With regards to the Urban Design Advisory Panel that we have, are the members appointed or elected, or are they professionals in this particular area?
Mr. Noy?
Yes, through you, Deputy Lord Mayor. They are appointed by council, and they are professionals in their field.
Thank you. Did you hear that, Councillor Dutta?
Yeah, I couldn't hear, if they are professionals in this area. Are they professionals in the particular field for them to give us advice?
Mr. Noy?
Yeah, I think my mic's working now. They are professionals in their field, and they are appointed by council.
Councillor Dutta?
Thank you so much. Now, just some comments with regards to this. I endorse the points raised by Alderman Briscoe, and I think there are some very valid points. However, there are other points as well. Let me just make 3 observations here. Firstly, we as a planning authority don't make decisions, and it is my understanding, based on affordability of housing. That's not the criteria, and hence I can't use that as a criteria to make my judgment. That's a separate issue altogether. If we tie it together and lock it in, it will confuse the issue. Secondly, my other observation I make is this, that the panel, the Urban Design Advisory Panel, makes this statement in the report, and I quote, "It is the panel's advice that the height of the proposed development, particularly for approximately the rear half of the site, does not satisfy the City of Hobart Planning Scheme performance criteria." Now again, the decision is not based on the fact that these guys are, this is going to be affordable. And how do we define what is affordable and what is not affordable? For some, 100,000 may be affordable, others may go for 200,000. Then you lose out those people. So again, we must define what we mean by this thing. But for me, if we have a panel that we have appointed and they are professionals in this field, we have, as it were, 2 alternative views. One view is of the panel, and the other view given to us is of the staff, who are also professional in the field. We, as elected members, choose and make our own judgment and use our discretion to make this decision. And in this regard, I use the discretion based on the planning scheme with 5 reasons given as to why I would support the motion recommended by the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dutta. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. And just to round out the argument made by Councillor Dutta, I've got a couple of questions for the Director. Director, just to confirm, are our planning officers experts in their field?
Director.
Through you, Deputy Lord Mayor, they certainly are.
Thank you. And just to confirm, they did recommend approval. Did they do that with the argument of housing affordability, or were there actual planning considerations?
Housing affordability was not a criteria under the scheme, so they made the recommendation based on the performance criteria.
Thank you very much. Deputy Lord Mayor, look, there's been a large number of good points that were made tonight on this item. I would be supporting the foreshadowed motion. I'll try just look. We have an application before us where the developer has done everything within their ability to consult with staff, to consult with their planning officers, and have been very conciliatory in how they came forward with an application that respected all of the points that were given to them and all the advice that was given to them from our planning officers. That included treating the heritage building at the front with a great deal of respect, and the result of that was a recommendation for approval, which I believe the officers got right. It's, as was said, it's an application for a large number of dwellings that are 1 and 2 bedrooms. They're dwellings that are directly, whilst Councillor Dutta is right, this isn't necessarily a planning consideration, but it's one that we do also need to be cognisant of. These are dwellings that, unlike some of the ones in the past, the argument has been made that these will be multi-million-dollar apartments, or these aren't relevant to the housing discussion. These are apartments. These are dwellings that are directly relevant to the housing discussion. This isn't. I'm not sure if Alderman Briscoe picked up what I said earlier. I think he may have misinterpreted what I said, but this isn't a developer that's aimed to set out and push the boundaries of what's appropriate for the area and see what they can get away with. This is a development that great pains were taken to ensure that what was put forward was appropriate. This is an area, like many that are in the zone of transition at the moment, and this is a prime area for the kind of development that we do need as a city. And the main issue, I think, by some people in the chamber today of the rivulet, the design in relation to the rivulet, for those that were present and heard the deputations, were informed by what other buildings in the area had done. Many other developments in that area, there are many other buildings in that area that did develop right up to that rivulet boundary. So the advice that they were given, and ultimately, once again, it was from a planning perspective, it was supported by the officers. So look, I think this is one that should be a clear-cut discussion, and it should be a clear-cut decision for us as a council. Not only does this development clearly align with the rules of our planning scheme, they also clearly align with what we want as a city and how we want to grow as a city. So when we do hear certain representations from certain cohorts of the community, it is incumbent of us to filter that through our responsibilities as a planning authority, and also our responsibilities as wardens of the city, to make sure that what we do have growing into the city is what we want. So I would urge everybody to support the foreshadowed motion, because I think it is a development and it's a project that would greatly contribute to our city.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor, I think this development could have gone either way with the officer's report, and it just happened to fall on the side of approval. But that didn't meet the requirements of the planning committee. We chose to refuse this project based on a number of issues, and I think one of the main issues for me was the fly-through that we were able to see, which unfortunately the rest of the council haven't had the opportunity to see, and that was a critical factor in determining my decision to vote for a refusal. So let's just go through the the 5 reasons given for refusal. The project does not meet the acceptable solution for the performance criteria with respect to clause 15.4.1A1 or P1 of the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme because the building height is not compatible with the scale of nearby buildings, does not allow for a transition in height between adjoining buildings and does not make a positive contribution to the streetscape. I agree fully with that, having seen the big wall that goes from an acceptable height at the top of the hill, but as it heads towards the rivulet, it suddenly becomes a big obstruction to the skyline and to everything around it, built right to the rivulet. The second reason for refusal, because the grade of the vehicular access is not safe, efficient or convenient, having regard to suitability for the type and volume of traffic likely to be generated by the use and development and ease of accessibility and recognition of users. So while reading the document, there were issues about the lifts basically and how they were to operate, but on balance it was suggested that they would be okay. So not a confident decision, but a decision that they would be okay. So I do have issues with the way those 2 lifts will be used, so I support that second reason for refusal. Third reason, because there will be loss of historic cultural significance of the place because of the development's incompatible design, including its height, bulk and siting. And I think I support that fully because I do think the height, the bulk and the siting is inappropriate as we head down the block. 4, the development has not been designed to be subservient and complementary to the place due to its scale, bulk and siting. Same reason, the other large building next door only goes halfway down the block and there's a considerable amount of space between the rear of that building and the rivulet, and it doesn't have the same sort of standout bulkiness as you're coming along Collins Street. And 5, because the materials, built form and fenestration do not respond to the dominant heritage characteristics of the place. And this building does not respond at all to the dominant heritage characteristics of the place, as Councillor Alderman Briscoe has demonstrated in his contribution at the start. So I don't think I can support this. I can't change my mind tonight, and I think that's my right as a councillor to make up my own mind and not be cajoled into changing my mind because others think I'm voting in the wrong way. So it's our right as individuals to make a decision, and I've made a decision that I won't be supporting this development and I will be supporting the committee's recommendation for refusal.
Thank you. Further discussion. Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Look, I had real difficulty coming to my decision tonight, and I've really been thankful for everybody actually putting their 2 cents in. I do understand the perspective that Alderman Barakis has put forward, and certainly also what Alderman Zuko has said, and I think as has been pointed out at 6.7.19, ultimately the question of transition is a subjective one. So having had a look at all of the copious amounts of information that we had to deal with on this particular issue, gone down and had a look at the site itself, and not been led by various different lobby groups or even councillors or aldermen, and making my own decision on this particular issue after reading the information, the copious amounts of information that we had, I will have to tend to agree with Councillor Harvey, I think, and Councillor and Alderman Briscoe as well, because it is a very special part of Hobart, and I think, as has been put forward in various different development applications, come back 2, 3 times, we are open to having things come back to us and have a different opinion. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Firstly, I have a question to Mr. Noy. Mr. Noy, do we know if these mostly 1-bedroom apartments are all, are there any for short stay accommodation, or is that not clear in this application?
To that question, no, the application is for permanent dwellings. It's not for short stay accommodation.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Listen, I know that we had 170 representations. 2 of those were, I think, for the application, and there are 43 1 to 2 bedroom apartments over 8 floors, 6 above ground. I think there are obviously many discretions which could go either way in relation to this application. Now we have the planning staff who have provided a recommendation for approval, a report. However, so many of those things that I read of that report screamed out to me to say, well, these aren't appropriate in relation, or this, as far as my interpretation would go, I would see that particular issue as a problem, and perhaps not. I wouldn't have expected to see some of those interpretations. That's what you have with planning. We had the Urban Design Advisory Panel provide some information which suggested that the built form and scale of this building wasn't particularly as sympathetic to the area, as Alderman Briscoe has pointed out, with its relationship to many of the heritage buildings and its bulk and size in this particular area. The fall of the site and the building, where the building would be situated, is 10 metres, and that goes right down to the Hobart Rivulet, and the effective height from the rivulet to the top of the building is 20 metres, which, whilst building to the rivulet banks is recommended, it's not necessarily recommended if it's twice the height of what is suggested in that area. So there's a significant canyoning effect of something that's quite precious for our city. So in effect, I think the bulk and density, the height, and the relationship to the rivulet is some of my concerns, and particularly that lower building on Collins Street. So I won't be supporting this. Alderman Varakis, do you wish to sum up?
No, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So, Councillor Coates?
Apologies, it was out of order, but just a question to the mover of the motion on the books. Through you, Chair, just a question to the mover of the motion on the books. I'm just wondering if he's willing to move all 5, because having listened to all the concerns and listened to the Chair's concerns raised and deputations obviously received, obviously they've got here 5 reasons for refusal, but we heard, and the Chair just listed out her concerns around visual bulk, scale, size, etc. But when it comes to number 2, and I note the words from Councillor Harvey when he went through them, and he did obviously say that he felt that, you know, it was a very balanced report, but ultimately it fell on one side of the line. But I wonder if the mover might want to consider taking number 2 out, because, you know, if it did get appealed and go to tribunal, it would just add extra costs to both sides, when that one was not really raised as a concern by many of the representations.
And you probably say the same thing. It is a recommendation from the committee, so the mover has to move the recommendation from the committee.
Okay,
so an amendment could happen. I'm sorry to...
Yep,
Oh, you would have said that in a moment, I imagine.
Thank you. So I take it there's no chance for an amendment at this point, I don't think, because I think everybody has spoken apart from, well, unless either Alderman Sexton or Councillor Ewan wanted to move that. It doesn't look like it. So I'll put the motion for refusal. Those in favour, say aye. Aye. Those against? We'll have a show of hands. Aye.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Sherlock, Alderman Briscoe, and Deputy Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dudder.
Councillor Dudder, sorry. Thank you.
And those against?
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Coates, Councillor Ewan, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas. Yes, that's it.
So what do we have there?
Lost, Lord Mayor, 5 votes to 6.
Okay, so the motion is lost. Can we have the foreshadowed motion, please? Councillor Coates?
Foreshadowed motion as per the City Planning Committee. I'll just load it up here from the 15th.
The original motion.
The original motion.
Original motion.
Yep.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Alderman Thomas. Does anybody want to speak to this motion? We basically know what it is. Nobody wants to speak to it. So I'll put the original, the motion as it was on the Planning Committee. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? No. Show of hands. Those for?
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Coates, Councillor Ewan, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas.
And those against?
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Dutta, Alderman Briscoe, and the Deputy Lord Mayor.
The
It's
motion,
carried, Lord.
motion is carried. We now move to item 10.2, which is 98 Argyle Street. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Deputy Lord Mayor, this item comes to us from the committee without a recommendation. So at your indulgence, I'll test the floor and move the officer's original recommendation for approval.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you. Look, I don't think it needs too much introduction. The development is for demolition and a new building for 20 multiple dwellings at 98 Argyle Street. Similar to the previous item, this one is in a transition area. I understand there were some concerns raised about it, but ultimately, and I think once again the officer's got it right in this instance, and as well, not just the fact that this will include 20 multiple dwellings once again in a very relevant and needed time, but as well as that, this is in an area where many in this chamber, including the Lord Mayor, even though I don't think we've heard her reflections on this particular item, have earmarked or suggested as areas that would be appropriate for some intensification and some further development, especially for housing. So, look, this is one that lines up with our future goals as a city, lines up in addressing our needs for this city, and is one that once again the design of was informed by consultation with our planning officers, and it was an application where the applicants have done everything within their ability to put forward something that, once again, with consultation from the officers, is as sensitive to the area as they possibly could have, whilst being able to provide what they need to provide, both for their own reasons and to address the needs of our city, predominantly housing. So, look, I hope this one is not a controversial decision. I hope it's an easy one for the chamber here tonight, because I think it is once again one that I think we'll start realising and might even be a proof of concept for the transition in this area that many in this chamber have already spoken about the need for.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, we did hear a lot of the deputations, and it came out that it actually was within the Woolly recommendation for this area. However, the developer or the applicant, on consideration, has suggested a further amendment, which I suggest that I move as an amendment at the moment, to increase the balcony so that the balcony sizes actually fit in with the acceptable solution. And they're proposing an increase in the balconies. The only way we can do this at the moment is, so the initial design wasn't 100% right, but the applicant heard heard the officers and heard the deputation and suggested an amendment to the submitted plans to achieve compliance with acceptable solutions of the proposed modification would ensure each balcony achieves or exceeds the minimum horizontal dimension of 2 metres and a minimum area of 12 square metres. And there are diagrams, and I'm pretty sure the officers have got these ones. So we have to put this change in, we have to put it in as a condition of the planning permit. So I move that the changes, the officers have the changes.
We are seconder of that amendment. Thank you, Councillor Ewan.
Um,
And was there anything about landscaping, or was that it?
I think that was it. I'm fairly sure that's what they're suggesting. Again, there was concerns about communal open space too, but I don't think they've offered any response to that as an amendment. Look, as Alderman Baracus said, this is definitely a transition area. However, there are important buildings around here that I think the developers have responded to that. And whilst there was concerns of people nearby, it seems that the buildings they live in are about the same height as this one. So this is a transition area. We have in the past identified this whole street to be a place as transitioning from car yards or car showrooms into residential, and this is probably the first one of them that is significant. So whilst I had an opposition to it at committee, I have changed my mind because of the concessions by the developer and a further assessment of the report.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Deputy Lord Mayor, that was an oversight on my part. I actually had that ready to go and didn't have it. Can we just include that in the... We have.
Yeah, you've got it.
Move it separately.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Further discussion? Any further discussion? Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy. I didn't receive the amendment, so I'm assuming it only... Did we all get it?
It's in the hub.
It's in the hub, but
Okay.
it's probably come out fairly late, I think.
Okay, no, I missed that amendment. But I have reconsidered my position on this project, having thought about it with a bit more time, and I voted against this at the committee meeting, but having had a bit more time to consider this particular proposal and the nature of that area, I will be changing my decision tonight, so I will be supporting this proposal, and having now this amendment to increase the balcony, that will also support me, help me in making my mind up to support this proposal.
Thank you. Further discussion? I don't know, have you got your hand up, Alderman Zuko, or? And you're on mute. Okay, what did he say?
No, I didn't have my hand up.
All right, it's a little hard to see. All right, thank you. Any further discussion? I'll just make a couple of points. Look, whilst the points that Alderman Baracus have made in relation to generating more development in this area is something that most of us want to see, we are considering this as part of as a planning authority. So there are still some concerns that I have in relation to this in the scope and the positioning of this building, given it's virtually twice the number of stories next to a three-storey building, and in a very what I regard as a very important part of Argyle Street, which has been fairly butchered in a lot of the areas. This is probably one of the more intact parts of the street, particularly across the road from the fire station. Having said that, I can understand why there is reason to support this. However, at this point, I won't be supporting it. If there's no further discussion, do you want to sum up?
I'm not sure that's necessary, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So I'll put the motion for approval as moved by Alderman Barakis. Those in favour? Oh, sorry, we'll do this. We'll do the amendment first. So I'll put the amendment firstly in relation to the balconies. Those in favour? Those against? It's carried unanimously. It now becomes part of the substantive motion. I'll put that. Those in favour? Those against? No. Show of hands. Those in favour?
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta. Did Councillor Dutta have your hand up? I think he did.
No.
No? Okay. Okay, sorry. Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Councillor Ewan, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
Those against?
Councillor Dutta and Deputy Lord Mayor.
The motion is carried. We now move to 10.315 Parliament Street, Sandy Bay. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Item 10.3 is 15 Parliament Street. That council approved an application for a garage at the venue. I don't think it's necessary to speak too much on this.
Thank you. Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Yep.
Discussion? Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy. The proponents here have specifically requested that they have a non-permeable surface for the driveway, and I can understand that. It allows less runoff into the stormwater system and allows more permeation into the groundwater or into the grounds of the property, and that's a good outcome. Putting water into the ground is better than putting it into the stormwater system if the ground can accommodate that. And this house being 140 years old, I'm sure has seen a lot of rain in its time, and it's been well able to accommodate water soaking into the ground. So can I just doubly check with the director about what sort of a condition or what we could propose to allow a permeable surface to occur and support the will of the proponents here?
Mr Noy?
Yes, Deputy Lord Mayor. Paving is an alternative that could be accommodated as of right. So we certainly could provide advice clause to remind the applicant that a paving might be an alternative consideration for them. There are different paving products out there that does allow that absorption. So, yeah.
All right. But I think specifically they wanted to use a gravel, but the argument is that the gravel can be dragged out of the driveway into the street and into the stormwater. So could we condition this that a permeable pavement solution to the satisfaction of the director? Would that make sense? Or was that additional work for you?
No. It's not. What I would say is that could simply be an advice that they could look to that as an alternative, should they so wish. We don't need, as of right, to use that alternative pavement, so it's not necessary to impose that as a condition. Just can be included
as advice. Okay, well, can we include that as advice?
Would you like to move that?
I will.
Yep.
Well, I don't need to move advice, do we? We do? Okay, I'll move that as advice, that a permeable surface be considered.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Sherlock, thank you. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the amendment. Those in favour for the permeable advice? Was there anybody against that? No. Okay. Alderman Barakis, did you wish to sum up?
No, Deputy Lord Mayor, other than to endorse what Councillor Harvey said. I think that was everybody was on the same page on that when it came up in committee. So,
thank you. So I'll put the substantive or the motion with that advice clause. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried unanimously. Now we move to 10.4, which is 8 Old Proctors Road, Tolmans Hill. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll move the item.
Thank you. Seconded by Alderman Thomas.
Deputy, I couldn't resist rising to the Tolmans Hill, notwithstanding we're about an hour ahead of what I predicted we would be tonight.
Jinx it.
I looked at the rest of the agenda, I'm feeling safe. Deputy, I need to commend, we often get into a habit of commending our officers and for every good reason, but tonight I think Mr Doyle, and I think the help of the federal government in terms of grant processes, this is a major thing for the Tolmans Hill. I mean, that was a lovely estate, but it was built on an incredible hill. It had very few, it didn't have a recreation area such as this. We were very fortunate getting the land from the Crown in the right of the state of Tasmania, but we then quite wisely put in a playground, but we left it without any toilets. We left it without any real facilities, except for a very good playground. But it meant that the kids had to play and recreate and then run for the nearest house wherever they needed to go, or down to collegiate, down to the sheds at collegiate. But it was a very difficult situation that the city had a large playground without any facilities. And look, this has happened very quickly. It's a significant advance, and I think the people of Tolmans Hill will be delighted that this has come to pass. So I commend this to the council.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe.
Just very briefly, the interesting thing during a tour of this park, it might have been beginning of last year or the end of the previous year, the director pointed out when I was doing a tour of where this toilet was going to go that this is a very busy park and a very popular park, but not only for the people of Tolmans Hill, for other people. At the time, I don't think the kids rushed to nearby houses. They actually rushed to the bush around, so I think... too much to do now. So I do commend, and it's one of those projects that there's no... I think everyone's going to be happy with it at the outcome of this. It's not a contentious project.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Harvey?
I'm really tempted to talk about this, but I won't. Other than say, it's a good outcome.
He did talk.
Works to prove it, by the sounds of it. Something out there rumbling. All right. So if there's no further discussion, do you wish to sum up?
No, thank you,
Okay.
Lord Mayor. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Okay, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried unanimously. Item 10.5 is 14 Thelma Drive, West Hobart, for a dwelling. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll move the motion.
Thank you. Seconded by Alderman Briscoe. Discussion.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. This is it was interesting design. I think there was a few concerns raised, particularly about the wall in this one. Ultimately, though, I think this is one that the committee and the officers both agreed what was ultimately compliant with the planning provisions. It's for a three-storey dwelling, which is 8.6 metres high, 2 garages, 4 bedrooms, 2 living areas, a swimming pool, and various other outdoor areas. So I'll just move the motion, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Further discussion? No discussion. I think there was some landscaping which could improve the wall, which was likened to, or was much higher than the Berlin Wall or the Palestine Wall. So hopefully that will soften it to a degree.
But Lord, sorry, Deputy Lord Mayor, I also think it was about the loss of the view of having a big wall that currently doesn't exist, that will exist in the future, and that will impact on the neighbours' views. But unless things have changed in the last few years, and I'll echo Darlene Haig, we have no right to a view. So I assume that's still the case. So we'll just check that. Has there been any additions to that, the right to a view? It still doesn't exist?
Yeah, through you, not under the planning scheme. There are some provisions around new tree plantings and the like, but certainly not under the planning scheme.
Planting of big concrete walls?
No, unfortunately.
So it's unfortunate for the neighbours that they will lose their view potentially, but I don't think we can do anything about that at this stage.
Thank Thank you. If there's no further discussion, did you want to sum up, Alderman Barakis?
I thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Okay, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried unanimously. Item 10.6 is for 160 Elizabeth Street, Hobart, change of use to bulky goods sale and food services. Alderman Barakis.
Deputy Lord Mayor, I'll move the motion.
Seconded by Councillor Ewan.
The work's happening. That's a good idea.
Okay, so if there's no discussion...
Lord Mayor, could you just remind me what this is? I've forgotten since I read it at committee.
Well, I can't say. Apologies, I'm trying to find it on the planning committee agenda, but I can't seem to find it.
Lexus, wasn't
Oh, that's right. Yes.
it? Yeah.
That was just.
So I thought you meant what the fireworks were.
The Lexus showroom.
The one underneath the rocks, the cafe / car dealership for Lexus.
Okay, so any discussion in relation to this? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried unanimously. Item 11, which is the Golf Links Estate Heritage Precinct provisions. Alderman Barakis. $289 Lena Valley Road. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll move that one as well.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Any discussion in relation to this? No discussion? I'll put that. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried unanimously. Now we go to item 11, Golf Links Estate Heritage Precinct.
That's our house.
Yeah, I'm going to log out. I will go back to I'll go back to isolating. Done my enough for the night. Really not feeling well. Thank you.
Thank you for your presence. Bye-bye. Barakis, item 11.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. This is item 11, the Golf Links Heritage Precinct provisions.
Mr. Sherlock, thank you.
Thank you. There was council earlier moved that we seek some advice to make changes to the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme in relation to further restrictions on or further provisions for the Golf Links Heritage Precinct. For various reasons, the advice came back that that should not go ahead, given that we have LPSs and stuff that are coming up that will address a lot of those concerns. So the recommendation was that no further controls be introduced.
Yes, until we consider them with the local provision schedule. Right, thank you. So we had Councillor Sherlock second that. Is there anybody who wants to talk to this motion? I might just mention that this came up as a particular issue, particularly around 19 View Street, which came to council and was quite controversial, went to the Planning Appeals Tribunal, and the pattern of development was seen to be very important, but there was seen to be a lack of protection for those residents in that area, and this will come, and people, the public will have a right to put in their representations during that statutory process when the planning scheme goes to those local provisions. So there will be that opportunity for people to put their views and perhaps change things at that point. Do you want to summarise?
I thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Okay, so I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Item 12, monthly planning statistics. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll move this one. I'm not sure if too much discussion is needed.
Thank you, Alderman Thomas. Discussion? No discussion. I'll put that. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried unanimously. Item 13, which is the monthly building statistics.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll move that one. That's best for everybody's reading. I'm not sure if too much further context is required for this one.
Thank you. And we have a seconder, Councillor Sherlock. Discussion? There's no discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Now, item 14 is a notice of motion that I've moved, but I'll ask Councillor Harvey to move this on my behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. I'll move the item.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan.
Councillors, Alderman, this is a motion that a report be prepared that investigates ways council can provide advice to property owners regarding dwelling and property modifications with a view to increase accommodation options across Hobart. The advice be tailored for people who might want the flexibility to remain living at their property as their lifestyle might change as they age, and also to increase the dwelling capacity on their property. And I think we're all aware that there's quite a number of large houses in Hobart with very few people living in them. And I think there is opportunity to encourage people to look at how they can modify their house in order to turn it into maybe multiple dwellings, or to take a lodger, whichever way is suitable for them, and to be able to access that information through a process or through council, portal or something, I think could help encourage people to do so. So rather than downsize out of your house, you could downsize within your house like you've suggested here, which I think is a really good idea. This had unanimous support at the committee, as I understand, and generated a bit of enthusiastic discussion of support.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Alderman Thomas and I were wondering how to get Paris into the debate tonight to talk about the limits, and I've worked it out that there is six-storey limits to basically central Paris, and that's why when you let me finish, Alderman Thomas, I might be able to help you. It's because the City Council allows division of apartments, and it may be that some the barriers to subdivide some of the big mansions in Sandy Bay or West Hobart into smaller units, whether it's temporary division. There may be ways that we can do via our planning scheme to increase the density and achieve the purposes of your motion here, that people might want to age in place, but the house is too big. But by having the ability to divide the house, whether it's temporary or long-term, it may be facilitated by our planning scheme, like they have done in Paris, where by having a six-storey limit in the central Paris, they've got some of the highest densities in the world of people. And obviously they have, and this is to answer Alderman Thomas' comment a moment ago, they have got the area slightly outside the CBD or the central Paris, where they allowed skyscrapers, so it doesn't interfere. There was a mistake, and all Parisians hate it. There's an apartment that appeared near the Luxembourg Gardens, and the few times I've been to Paris, the locals point out that is a mistake. The council should not have allowed it. That should have been out in the areas where they allow skyscrapers. But so I support your motion, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor. I think it's timely, but there are also innovative ways we could somehow increase the density in existing stock, and it would help my view that sometimes we're going to lose curtilages of the gardens around big houses for pop-up units and whatever. I think that we should resist that. If there are other ways we can do it, particularly the bigger houses of Battery Point and Sandy Bay and so on, it may be the way to go.
Thank you. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'm not going to reflect on whatever gentleman's agreement Alderman Briscoe and Alderman Thomas had as far as including Paris in the conversation.
Or is that
okay. Through you, Deputy. Look, this is a motion that, as Councillor Harvey said, was met with pretty enthusiastic approval and made for some enthusiastic discussion. I think there's been an issue that's long been happening for a while, where there's developers that are either institutional developers or very well-resourced developers that have the ability to afford consultants and pay lawyers and pay planners to ensure that what they're doing is within the rules, or when they are pushing the boundaries of the planning scheme, they're doing it willingly and knowingly. But at the same time, we do see many development applications come up from the everyday person. I think we had one example in Golf Links Estate, actually, I think it was, where there was a driveway that somebody put forward, not realising that it was in a heritage zone and therefore had different rules than everywhere else. Or people that have, trying to put forward an application only then to find out that there's a million things that they've done wrong, and how dare they do such a terrible thing. So if we can provide a bit more ease of access to that sort of advice, so that those sort of smaller everyday Hobartians are able to access a fraction of the advice that those larger developers have, I think that will make for a fairer planning scheme. I'm glad that the heritage considerations were included willingly by the Deputy Lord Mayor in the motion, and I will just reflect, and I won't suggest any changes because I don't want to detract from the intent of the motion. But there have been times where applicants have worked with council officers, taken advice from council officers, adjusted and amended their applications to be reflective of the advice that they were given. Then they come forward to council, and the treatment's almost as if they've done the wrong thing in putting forward such a horrendous or such an application that's so out of line with the planning scheme or with community expectations. So I would just hope that if we are providing advice to applicants, there is hopefully some sort of mechanism that protects those that do take the advice, in not finding themselves in that sort of situation. But I don't think there's a necessity to necessarily change the motion here. Debbie, I think there's many times that you and I disagree on a lot of things when it comes to planning, but I think you're worthy of commendation for this one, because I think this is a good motion.
Thank you. Further discussion? Further discussion, I might just add a couple of points. I think everybody around the room is really looking for housing solutions, no matter what we're doing and what positions we might take on general planning authority matters. But we are all genuinely concerned about the need and the desire to have more options in relation to housing and even housing affordability. And what this motion does is to identify that there is planning is a war zone for a lot of people. They don't know how to navigate it, and they may be at their time of their lives or in a situation where they have a house, and many of the houses within Hobart are single dwellings on often large blocks, sometimes 3 or 4 bedroom houses, maybe bigger, which could be modified or altered so that they could have, as Alderman Briscoe has suggested, an apartment or that potential further down the track. Even doing alterations to have a family area or a second kitchen or bathroom may be something that could be factored in, so it could further down the track be as a separate dwelling within the house or on the property. So there are a multitude of options. I did speak before putting this forward to committee with the Institute of Architects and the Housing Industry Association of Tasmania, and they too are interested in finding solutions. So it's working with those organisations, working with seniors organisations, and trying to come up with solutions that may well help increase and improve the stock. So it has explanations in plain English, so it's easy and readily understandable. But it also looks to be cost effective as well, so that it's not a burden on the council planning staff, that we can look to see if there are ways to make this cost neutral or effectively a service, but also bringing in revenue with any sort of change in relationship. So do you want to sum up, Councillor Harvey?
No, well, just a little bit. Only to say that it's your motion's been well received, well supported, and it looks like there's some enthusiasm around the room. So, well done. Excellent motion. It sounds like there's opportunity also for us to consolidate how we live. It sounds like Alderman Briscoe might be moving in with Alderman Thomas over there to free up a house somewhere. Bit of a romance.
So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried. Item 15 is the Local Government Association of Tasmania, and we're in Finance and Government's territory. Were you going to introduce these on behalf of the Chair?
Yeah,
Thank you, Alderman Sexton.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. So I'll move agenda item 15, Local Government Association Tasmania elected member nominations for voting delegates.
Thank you. And we have Councillor Ewan who's seconded.
So that parts 1 and part 2 I think are fairly self-evident. Part 3, however, does need to be dealt with by council. At the committee meeting, we weren't sure whether Alderman Barakis wanted to continue to fill the second proxy voting delegate position, or indeed whether there was another elected member who would like to occupy that position. So that's the purpose for part 3. So we do need to seek any nominations for that second proxy voting delegate position, Deputy.
Do we have any nominations? Thanks, Alderman Sexton.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. If I might respond to that, if the council deigns to have me as the second proxy again, I'd love to fill that position.
Thank you. Any other nominations? Nope. So you're duly nominated, I think. So that just become part of the motion. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So if there's no further comments, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried. Thanks, Alderman Barakis. Item 16, fees and charges.
Yes,
Alderman
thank
Sexton.
you, Deputy Lord Mayor. So fees and charges are omissions. These were left out of the previous list, and of course they needed to be added in, so they were done so at the most recent committee meeting. I'll move those.
Thank you. Discussion? No discussion. We've had a seconder. If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried. Item 17, outstanding parking debt, clamping of vehicles. Alderman Sexton.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. So the outstanding parking debt clamping debt, with the committee has recommended we not pursue the clamping of vehicles for owners of vehicles. That followed the recommendation of the officers.
Just a second. Discussion? There's no discussion. I'll put that. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried unanimously. Item 18, City of Hobart rate postponements policy amendment. Alderman Sexton.
Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll move City of Hobart rate postponements policy and the amendment thereof.
Alderman Thomas.
The reason for this is that it needed to be, the Hobart of City rate postponements policy needed to be in line with the hardship policy that was adopted during COVID and which has been extended in various forms, and the words needed to coincide, so hence the amendment.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on this motion? No discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried. Item 19, we go to Parks and Recreation Committee, response to petition. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Deputy. I'll move the motion that's on the books.
Councillor Ewan, thank you. Seconded.
Just very briefly, Deputy, the matter responds to a petition tabled in the Council in May 2021 from the residents of Rupert Avenue requesting the City plant an avenue of trees in Rupert Avenue. It is proposed the City undertake detailed investigations design work for the potential installation of new street trees. However, with finite funding available for new street trees in the new locations across the city networks, the prioritisation of this request me to be assessed against other areas identified for new street plantings. But there is a fair bit of work to be done before any street trees are installed. It appears that it has got very good support, and as the motion indicates, the issues that would have to be covered off, local area consultation engagement being the most important first step. There's been other trees, recent new trees in other streets in Mount Stewart, and I notice it's gaining favour to have street trees, and hopefully they're the right type.
Thank you. Discussion, Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Just a question for whoever's best placed to ask it. I know we've had a few cases, and I don't know if it's things that have come before the council or individual correspondence that's come from constituents where street trees that have been placed, or trees on council property near private property has either grown over or caused trouble or pulled the roots up or had some sort of issue, whether it's dumping leaves and other such stuff on people's cars or whatever. And in the report, would it be likely that we'd be investigating trees that would minimise the instances of that, just so we don't end up having those?
Leaves dropping. Councillor, Mr Doyle.
Deputy Lord Mayor, just to get clarity, Alderman Barakis, are you asking about the variety of tree?
Correct, yeah.
Certainly, the street tree strategy gives fairly clear direction that deciduous trees are preferred. So they do drop leaves, but that means it does allow the winter sun in. But there is extensive consultation with the residents, and the species selection forms part of that consultation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion?
I'll just briefly add to that in summing up, Deputy.
Anybody else who wants to
Right,
speak, so
yes.
go ahead.
Very early in my career in this council, the council paid out a significant amount of money because a tree had got under the foundations of a house in Goulburn Street. And I think it was a significant amount of money. And since then, the Parks Department, or whatever they're called these days, or I know they're a bit more titled, are very, very cautious in the way they protect the roots. And I think that the leaves dropping is one issue, but the other one is undermining foundations and infrastructure of the city. So I think they're very, in their design work, they are aware, and it was a significant amount of money. I couldn't believe how much money that the city paid over to this property owner of a historic house in Goulburn Street, that all his foundations had to be underpinned and whatever.
Thank you. So I will put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried. Item 20, response to petition again, regular closure of Pinnacle Road to allow safe access for walkers, cyclists and others. Alderman Briscoe.
Thanks, Deputy. I move the motion that's on the books.
Thank you. Councillor Ewan.
Thank you. The matter responsible petition tabled in council meeting held in July 2020, calling for the city to regularly close Pinnacle Road to motor vehicles, allowing walkers, cyclists and others safe, enjoyable use of the road. And the opportunity to ride or walk or run Pinnacle Road without vehicles is currently only available as a participant in special events run by external organisations, for example, the Iconic Point to Pinnacle, in Nunny Challenge, and in certain snow conditions. However, due to resourcing and cost limitations, it's proposed not to support this proposal. However, I think it was your suggestion, Deputy, that we do recommend the officer report be referred to the City's Access Advisory Committee, and the petitioner be informed of the process of holding such events, such as Point to Pinnacle, and the approximate cost in temporary closing Pinnacle roads for such activities. And we do know through the snow and ice conditions that sometimes happen up there. I think it's around about 8 to 10 days a year it is closed anyway. But whether that's a safe and enjoyable way to enjoy the mountain when it's covered in ice, I have no idea. So again, it's not supported at this stage.
Thank you. Further discussion? Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Just if I might make a request that we vote on item part 3 of the item separately. I don't think that's necessary. I'm not going to spend too much time talking on it, but if that could be voted on separately.
So you okay? You want to vote for that separately?
Just about the report to go to the Access Advisory
So we're
Committee.
just here 1, 2 and 4? Okay, yes, that's fine. Further discussion? No? Okay, so...
I don't need to sum up.
You don't need to sum up?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'll put clauses 1, 2 and 4 firstly. Or should I? No, maybe I should do the third. Oh, yeah, okay. So I'll put 1, 2 and 4. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items, that's carried unanimously. Part 3, which is sending it off to committee, advisory committee. Those in favour? Aye. Those against?
Aye.
Show of hands. Those in favour?
Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Councillor Ewan, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe and the Deputy Lord Mayor.
And those against?
Alderman Barakis.
So those two, that's carried. So those two parts of the motion is carried. Item 21, Franklin Square Amenities Building. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you. I move the motion that's on the books.
Thank you.
Very briefly.
Alderman Thomas.
Very briefly, Deputy. Council at the meeting held in June 2019 considered a proposal to install luggage lockers in Franklin Square from a specific provider. The provision of lockers would achieve and complement several strategic goals for the city. It's proposed the city continue to progress the procurement of lockers to this end. However, as the previous decision identified a specific provider, the council is now asked to overturn that part of the previous decision to allow procurement to proceed in accordance with the city's procurement guidelines. So it's just a matter of, I think we probably need an absolute majority for this, but I'm fairly sure we'll get through because it is rescinding a decision. Just in talking to lockers, I often come across tourists who spend the day walking around with their baggage, waiting for a plane that goes at 6 o'clock and nowhere to put it unless they've organised something with their accommodation providers. But also there'll be other uses for it as well. And we all know when last time I travelled somewhere, there are usually luggage lockers in railway stations and bus stations and so on, which are not here in Hobart. So I think this way we've got, we'll add to the amendment to the city.
Thank you. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. So item 22, can I ask somebody move that? Thank you, Alderman Sexton, seconded by Alderman Barakis. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried, and I thank everybody for their attendance, and I'll now close this part of the open meeting. Thank you.